Got it. Thank you. Well, I want to welcome everyone. This is the first time we've done this. Thank you for coming today and spending your lunchtime with me. This is the first time we're doing a presentation on how to actually submit for the CITE conference. And we're going to cover a few topics here. We're not just going to walk you through the actual submission piece, but talk about what makes a good presentation, whether that's a breakout, a hands-on lab, or any other type of presentation that we may end up having. So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Laurel Nava. I'm Director of Education Programs and Partnerships. And I'd also like to introduce Tuda here. So Tuda, do you want to explain your new role at the conference?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Tuda Bentatu. I am CITE's Director of Member Engagement and Marketing. So in the past, Laurel was kind of the mastermind behind the conference. And then last year I started helping out. And then this year it completely transitioned under me and Jason Patton, who's here. I believe I'll let him introduce himself too. He's our new event specialist. So Laurel will still be doing all of the sessions and education component of the conference. But Jason and I will be helping with the rest of the logistics of the conference. So Jason, do you want to say hi real quick and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Jason Patton. As Tuda said, I'm the event specialist working closely with Laurel and Tuda. And yeah, we hope you get to learn a lot today and that you'll join us for the conference this year.
Great. Thank you so much. So our sessions are the core of our conference in many ways. A lot of times this is the only approval people get to attend a conference throughout the year. And so we really look forward to your submissions because they really make the difference in our content and making this a great conference. So as we walk through this, feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions. We are recording this for those who can't attend. If you don't feel comfortable unmuting yourself and asking, feel free to drop those into the chat. So we're going to get right started. Let's see. Okay, so the first part we want to talk about is how to structure a great presentation at the conference. One of the things that I think is intimidating for a lot of those is how do I fill up all of that time? There seems like there's a lot of time to fill up. And I will say that no matter what you do in a presentation, the time manages to fill up itself, no matter what. There's a lot of people in the room, they have questions, and you never have to worry about having too little content for a presentation. But it might be swirling around in your head about an idea that you want to share, and you're just like, how do I put this all together into something that makes sense at a conference? So I do want to go back to a basic story structure that's used by the Pixar writers. A lot of us are familiar with all of the Pixar movies, and they have always believed since the start of their animation studios that they should always base everything on a fantastic story instead of a bunch of images strung together. So in an interview with one of their senior writers, she talked about how this was the basic structure for a Pixar movie. And it's a great way to start, excuse me, with thinking about how you're going to actually structure a presentation. So once upon a time, you're very familiar with that. Then this happened and that happened until finally that's the end result. Now that sounds a little bit amorphous, but the consideration is that it's not just throwing up a lot of information at a group of people, but thinking about where you want them to end up to be and how you're going to get there from beginning to the end. I'm going to throw in some old school Greek philosophy right here. Aristotle's model of communication, even though it's thousands of years old, we still use it in so many different ways. And what this goes back to is an understanding that there's a speaker making a speech to an audience, and there's an intended effect. And these elements are crucial in making a great presentation, no matter what, considering a lot of times we get stuck on, okay, I'm the speaker, and what am I going to say? Well, without considering who the exact audience is and what you want them, what effect you want them to have, that can be crucial in making between a good presentation and a bad presentation. Excuse me, I'm going to pause for a moment. This is a presentation tip right here, and get something to drink. Just a moment. All right, thanks so much. So you're probably wondering, what does this ancient Greek philosophy have to do with my presentation? Well, the effect is the learning objectives. And this is something we're asking this year. And we want to be sure that you understand that we're not looking for a lot of detail about what standards are being addressed or anything like that. What we are looking for is, what should people leave with? Are they looking at a demonstration? Are they looking at information? Are you looking to have them practice something, especially in our hands-on labs? So what is the effect that you're hoping the audience will have as they finish your presentation and leaving? And once you're able to do that, it becomes a lot easier to backwards map how to actually build your presentation and build your session. But you're probably still wondering, like, okay, so I know I want them to come in with walk away with an understanding of this technical piece. Well, how do I get them to get there? And that's where I want to share something that we use in our CTO mentor program. This might look incredibly complicated, but it's a narrative structure suggestion for a 20-minute presentation. So you can add, as many of these as you want. But the point being that you start with a welcome, who you are, and in the end, you're going to do a Q&A and do kind of a reconnection point. But what are the key points that you want to make? So you can think about, here's my start, here's my end, break it up into 3, 4, 5, however many key points that you want to make, and then add detail. And having that as a structure for how you're going to do your presentation or how you're going to structure your PowerPoint helps you then work backwards into creating an effective summary. And you're probably wondering too, how do I fill up all of these slides? This is a great way to say each one of these dots, and technically could be a slide for your presentation. And again, you're the one filling out the detail or the additional detail, but breaking it up basically into beginning, end, and key points and how you got there. Now, this is a kind of a complicated graphic that makes a lot more sense in my head, but I do want to ask the question, does anybody have questions about this graphic? Anything I can answer? It's like great, makes perfect, fantastic. It's almost like a network structure. It's a network structure for a PowerPoint. Okay, so there is a fantastic resource I highly recommend. You do have to register to get this resource by Andy Goodman and Cause Communications, What Bad Presentations Happen to Good Causes. So here are the fatal 5. The fatal 5 things that go wrong in sessions and presentations. I'm going to read these out, which is fatal 5, number 1, reading the slides. Too many times you're trying to keep the attention of the entire audience. And if you have a lot of information up there and then you're reading it out, they start wondering, well, why am I here for a presentation when I could have just gotten the slide deck, or I could have gotten this as a handout and walked away, versus getting what they want from you as the speaker. Similarly, having way too much information packed in there, especially without a narrative structure, can make it really tough for people to walk away and say that was an effective presentation. Because again, we're looking for the effect, not necessarily dumping a ton of information on people. Third one was lack of interaction. In some of Andy Goodman's research, he points out that over 80% of people rated a great presentation as one that had opportunities for interaction with the presenter. So this is more than just a few minutes of Q&A at the end, but where can you build that Q&A into the entire session? Where can you ask for people's feedback? How does the experience of the audience feed back into what you're presenting and help make it more relatable? The lifeless presenters one, I feel like that is incredibly amorphous. That can be, how do you really define that? How would you do this for a group where you have absolutely no idea who might be showing up into the room. But really, that goes back to having a lot of practice. And what we teach in the CTO mentor program is to practice, 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 and then practice again. I highly recommend recording yourself giving a presentation, trying to get away from that lectern and walking around the room, interacting. That can be really intimidating for some folks. But the more that you record yourself, the more that you practice, you'll feel more comfortable, and you won't just be, again, reading off the slides and coming across almost wooden in a sense. And then finally, room or technical problems always mess up a presentation, or the presenter needing to step away to take a sip of water like I just did. So trying to do your best to make sure that what you have is what you need for that presentation, and that you're ready to go for all different possibilities. I'd say that one of the number one things that we see coming up is trying to use your own equipment and not having it connect well with the room, as well as losing any kind of slide advancing equipment and needing batteries at the last second. Those are some of the really toughest things that happen at the conference. I had a good question, so I want to go back a slide. Let's see if I can get this. A good question came in on the chat about what you would recommend in this slide for a transition. What I recommend here for that is, if you don't have a natural transition from idea to idea, it's just simply a title slide moving on to the next idea, but it helps people know that you're finishing up one section and going to another section. So it's not always entirely required, but if you're especially changing from key points and kind of closing out an idea, then having a transition idea or slide in there can make a lot of sense. Like this, there's a prime example. So that's it. We really wanted to emphasize how to think about designing and structuring your presentation before you actually submit, because we feel like that's the point where people often get stuck and go, I'm just not going to submit a session for the conference because I don't know how to put all of this information together. If you are stuck on any of what we just talked about, I highly encourage you to reach out to members of your regional group who've done presentations before. They're very open, and there's people in every single regional group who've presented at the conference. You can reach out to any of the boards of directors members. All of them have been done presentations at different points. And if either of those options feel a bit intimidating, I encourage you to reach out directly to me. I'm happy to even do a one-on-one, and we can talk through what you're thinking about and how you might want to structure that. And this is before or after your submission for the conference. So we have resources, we're here to help. And I do want to say that those sessions that come from our members are some of our most highly attended presentations. So you want to hear from each other, and the more that we can get presentations from you, that makes the conference all that much richer. So into the other intimidating part of all this, how to present. This is one thing, I put a really exciting slide, myself and board member David Thurston presenting, to kind of start with what is in the typical room. Now, this might change slightly in each conference venue or location. For example, there's a really short throw projector there. It might be farther back in the room. But as a presenter, the access you'll have available is to a lectern. Now, we typically call that a podium, but the podium is actually the stage the lectern sits on. So that's a lectern right there. There'll be a screen, a projector, a fixed microphone, an existing laptop, and speakers in the room. All of our connections are with HDMI. So if you are bringing your own equipment, we recommend being cautious about that. We encourage you to bring it on a flash drive. And if you're going to bring your own equipment, it really should, you should be sure that it connects to HDMI. I don't believe there's any changes in this, but the only big addition I can think of is that starting last year, we began recording sessions at the conference and making those available to attendees afterwards. So there might be recording equipment, almost guaranteed, in the back of the room, and occasionally a staff member, monitoring that and making sure that the audio and video are coming in well. And one thing that we ask of you is it's really exciting to see all that recording equipment and want to adjust it, but please don't touch it because those settings are done by the AV company and not anything that we should be changing on any of that. So talking a little bit about once you're in the room and how to put together an effective presentation, we do a little bit of design items. So one of the things that we recommend is if you look to the left of the screen, you're going to see some text. It doesn't really matter what that text says, but this is from an eye tracking study. So I don't know exactly the logistics of how it worked, but basically you can see that, you know, in our language, we are used to reading from left to right, and the eye will go back and forth, and you can see how many touch points the eye makes and how it goes from the left to the right over and over and over. So if you have a slide up there with a lot of text, a paragraph's worth of text, you're going to have people's eyes reading that and not on you. And of course, we know that reading is a modality that is very different from listening and engaging with a presenter. So if you get to that point where you have that much text that you need to communicate to people, consider that that is maybe a separate handout that they can read later. And instead you have only some key points on your screen. And on the right, same tracking study, but done with a YouTube video. And you can see that where people's eyes went is more, there's some basic informational about what is the video and so on, but they're really focused on the actual image there. So it's one of the reasons in PowerPoints that we really encourage, or any other Google Slides, whatever you're using in presentations, but we really encourage you to use images because they support what you're talking about, and they also support that engagement that's in the room. So you'll often see some of our best presentations that we remember, there's very little text at all on there. And it's a lot of our keynote presenters are like that. I can't think of a keynote where we've had a lot of text on the screen. And so as you're designing what your session is going to look like, you know, consider this as being an important point about presentation design. Again, feel free, unmute yourself with questions, comments, or put them in the chat. So if you are going to be having text on the screen, you'll see that when you have a big block of text, it makes a lot more sense to have a serif font. Our eyes are naturally trained to read those, so, you know, Times New Roman. It doesn't have to work as hard. But when you're in a presentation, because you don't want people sitting there and reading a huge block of text, then you want to encourage you to look at sans serif fonts. It does make a big difference on the screen, and it helps with the overall design. And that sounds like a really small, annoying point for me to be making, but it can make a giant difference in a presentation. And there's plenty of sans serif fonts that are available to everyone. So the other piece of that is to look at consider how you are doing your text and consider using bold. And just that's a hipster dog right there who likes Helvetica. I know that's, you know, the hipster font lately. But they are definitely cleaner without having those serif little bits on there on the pieces and being readable when they're bold. You have to consider that for a lot of these, you have somebody that is sitting 30 or 40 feet away from the screen. And so can look at that in the sense of when you record yourself, make sure that you're imagining you're sitting in that audience and trying to see what's on the slide. And if it's not necessarily bolded, if it's in a small font, it's going to be really hard for people in the room to read. And it's also important consideration from accessibility reasons. There might be people with limited sight who need a bigger font, who need a bold font, and they would really appreciate having that. Second, if you have your presentation available as a handout and you're able to send it to us for uploading in the app ahead of time, that can also make a difference for those who have sight restrictions. And then finally, too, we encourage you, if you have a video, to closed caption those videos. Again, the text on the screen will help, for those who are having hearing difficulties, and as well as showing everybody that you're considering what limitations may be out there. So I also wanted to point out something that we often see in difficult presentations, or ones that are hard to follow at conferences, is going smaller than a 22-point font, especially when it's on those screens, and in those, I think there are 8 or 10-foot screens in the room. So once you go smaller than 22 point, it becomes incredibly difficult to see. And something else that you'll often see when switching between a presentation, you don't see this as much anymore. I think it's really been fixed a lot, but for folks who used to design on Microsoft Office on an Apple machine and then try and transfer it to a presenting on a PC, occasionally you see issues about kerning. And kerning refers to the amount of space between the letters. You're actually able to modify that within the font paragraph abilities. So there is a default kerning for all different fonts, and you have the ability to squeeze or pull that out more. But again, it's more of a consideration. If you can look at the one on the top, there's a lot of space between the letters. And so your brain starts going to think, oh, those are different words necessarily. Whereas the middle one is more standard. And then the bottom word that says kerning, and everything's smushed together, and it's really hard to read. So another consideration for design as you're going through and making your presentation. So I also have a cute video which talks about some of the fatal flaws in making PowerPoint presentations. And I wasn't able to download a closed caption version, but there is a link to the YouTube video with closed captioning if you would like to see this. So let's hope it works. Tuda, tell me if this is not working correctly.
There's no audio.
I think that is what I was trying to fix, and it's not working, is it? Okay. Darn it. Would you mind stopping the recording for a sec so I can see if I can fix this?
That there's some things I hate about PowerPoint, and I figure it's kind of my duty to point them out. So here we go. Here's common PowerPoint mistakes. Number one, people tend to put every word they are going to say on their PowerPoint slides. Although this eliminates the need to memorize your talk, ultimately this makes your slides crowded, wordy, and boring. You will lose your audience's attention before you even reach the bottom of your first slide. Please don't do that anymore, please. Number two, most common, many people do not run spell check. Big mistake. Nothing makes you look stupider than spelling errors. If it's got a red line under it, recheck the spelling. And then finally, I hate this. Avoid excessive bullet pointing, only bullet key points. Too many bullet points, and your key messages will not stand out. In fact, the term bullet point comes from people firing guns at annoying presenters. Hence the bullet point. Bad color schemes, not good. Clashing background and font colors can lead to distraction, confusion, headache, nausea, vomiting, and loss of bladder control. I can't stay on that one too long. Here's something I've noticed. The number of PowerPoint slides you have in your talk, the less useful your talk actually is. Unfortunately, my presentation is right there. I've also noticed this. People love to pack data into their presentations. They shove more and more data thinking it's better, but it's not. The more data you have, the harder it is to read your slide, and the effectiveness plummets. Now you can improve the effectiveness by adding some shading and some 3D effects, and then some second order and third order effects, and then I know, let's add some labels. That'll help a lot. And that's pretty much every marketing slide I've ever seen right there. Yeah. Then some like VP of marketing standing there going, it's real clear in Q4. What the hell are you talking about? Now, I'm into in animation. People become animators in PowerPoint. You can have things flying all over the place, and that can be good. If you're a visual learner, that will improve the effectiveness of your performance. But if you're easily distracted, more animations and people have no idea what you're talking about. They're just, wow, that is cool, wow. And there's regions here, by the way. There's the simple but effective region. There's the active but confusing, the effective but boring, the active but ineffective, the dull but static region, the busy but useless, the ADD only region, the useful but amusing, the stupid but confusing, the dull triangle, the hyper triangle, the sleepy square, the dizzying pentagon, and everything else I just call pointless motion. That slide right there took me an hour and a half to make, right there. PowerPoint can just suck the life out of you. It's amazing. I've also come up with this. It's a kind of a little science I've invented called font analysis. Basically, the font you choose says something about who you are as a person. There's a huge list of fonts, and you choose one, and that says something about you. So be careful the font you choose. For example, if you choose Courier New, it happens to be my favorite, you're probably organized and structured. If you choose Matisse, it means you're artistic. And if you choose Times New Roman, it means you're lazy, apathetic, and unimaginative, and you always use the default. Oh. A lot of Times New Roman people, welcome. We have some more. If you use freehand script, you're a horrible speller, so you try to hide it with a hard-to-read font. Very smart. If you use Gothic, it means you're very pale and you wear black. And if you choose Wingding, it means you're a nerd and you have no life. In fact, if you know what those symbols mean, you will never have a date, trust me. Just don't bother.
All right, so I have to disagree with that last bit because I'm a nerd. I adore wingdings, and it's something that I think a lot of us in our community can embrace. So now we're going to switch gears a bit, and we're going to go into, into how to actually submit a presentation. So I am going to go to the CITE.org website. I'm going to go to events and the 2022 conference. This is a little bit different than we've had in previous years because we have adopted a new event registration and session submission process software called Cvent. So that's why the link looks a little bit different than it has in previous years. So here on the page, I'm going to submit a proposal, and I'm going to walk you through some of the things that we are looking for that we have listed here. Again, if you submit, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an automatic into the conference agenda. And how that works is we have a conference committee and we review every session. We're recording again, right, Tuda?
Sorry, you couldn't see me. Yeah, we're recording.
Okay, great, fantastic. And then again, we cannot, not only can we not guarantee if you're accepted, we can't guarantee a minimum number of attendees at your session, nor can we guarantee any way that you will know who attended your session. That's a question that we get frequently all the time. So our conference committee goes through, they review every single session. They might make recommendations on an accepted session about tweaking the title, tweaking some of the content a little bit that's in the submission description, anything like that before it's accepted. It will go into the conference agenda, but we don't do additional advertising for the sessions. Now, we will pull some out that we think will be really interesting to our members, and we'll post those on social media as a run-up to the conference. And so those are ones especially that are submitted by you, our CITE community. And then we do not guarantee, if you're going to have a session accepted at the conference, you will get the ability to register as a speaker and with a speaker only registration. And that means that you can come in and present your session at no cost and then hang around, answer some questions. But that doesn't mean that you can attend other sessions or receive any meals. However, we offer a significant discount for speakers to register for the entire conference if they would like to.
Laura, I had a question.
Yeah.
This is Mark Perro with Converge One. Thanks.
Sure.
On a recent point, you mentioned that you'll pull sessions out that you think are really interesting. Do you have any suggestions on content or topics that would, be somewhat interesting or fall in that category?
Definitely. For those that have broad application, we think in a lot of districts, that's one piece, or that is a new technology. So if you think that, a couple of years ago, we were highlighting a lot of sessions around esports when that was kind of a hot topic. Last year, we were highlighting sessions around the pandemic. So it's partly, what's current, what's hot right now, and especially those with our CITE members in them. So we encourage all of our exhibitors or vendors to submit sessions that have a CITE member as a co-presenter and who can directly talk about the experience of implementation in their district, because it gets more attendance, it provides more interest. And, on social media, you're going to get more shares and more likes when people see that their colleagues are presenting.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Sure. So we will ask you to register no matter what, so that you can get a badge if your session is accepted. On site, if you just show up and say I'm a speaker, it just completely clogs everything, slows you down, especially if you're trying to get in there quickly. And then again, please don't add co-presenters to your session unless you've confirmed with them, because often we'll confirm that with that person that they're a co-presenter, and no one likes to find out at the last minute that they've been signed up to co-present a session that they didn't know about. All of these items too, the speakers@cite.org is a general email. So feel free, if you have questions on other things related to that, to just, email us directly. So before you submit your session, you're gonna have to decide what the format is. We have single sessions that are approximately 45 minutes long, or 105 minutes for double sessions. And the reason why, we previously used to have them be, for example, 8 to 8:50. And we had a lot of complaints about transition time, that 10 minutes wasn't enough to finish up, especially if the session ran a little long, and get to the other session and network with people in between. So we say that there's a 15-minute transition period. Now, our assumption though is that, the room's not empty at the end of that 45 minutes, that you can go directly to that 45 minutes and you'll have a little bit of cushion time to answer some final questions or connect with attendees, who want to come up and ask you questions before they transition to their next session. So sometimes people go, well, for an hour-long session, that seems a really short time, but it's partly with that assumption built in that you're going to have some additional questions or people hanging around, and it lets the other speaker come in and put their stuff in with enough time to get ready. We encourage double sessions if they make sense, and you can go ahead and request it, but we can't always necessarily guarantee it. The other thing is we might ask you to repeat a session if we think it's going to be popular and more than what, there needs to be more than one session throughout the course of the conference. The breakout session, again, this is a lecture interactive format. It's kind of your standard format with a fixed microphone on the lectern. And we encourage you to step away from it as much as possible to be a good presenter. But we did notice last year, we had a couple of issues around that. Then your voice doesn't always carry in the room necessarily if you're stepping away from the lectern too much in the microphone, and then the video recording equipment has trouble picking you up. So we're going to try and work on that and see how we can address it. But classic speaker advice is to make it more interactive by coming out from behind that lectern as much as possible. So, Tuda and Jason will correct me if that ends up being something later on that we say that you have to be there for a recording. A panel session, there we go. So there, thanks Tuda. A panel session is obviously one where there's a moderated group of presenters. And the reason why we ask to know this ahead of time is if you're going to have if it's just you and one other presenter and you're going to take turns at the microphone, then you really probably only need one mic. But if you're having 4 people, let's say, that you want to have interact, then we have to have a different room set up, and we have a specific rooms assigned for panel presentations. So that's why we're asking for this ahead of time, is to know if it's really a true panel presentation. Sometimes people will put themselves down for the session submission, and then as we get close to conference, they'll say, oh, I'm inviting these 3 other people to come up and speak with me. And then they'll come into the room and be surprised there's only one mic. So that's why we have to know that ahead of time. And then our hands-on labs format. This is one area where I really like to encourage you to submit sessions, because it's one of the core features of our conference, and it makes it really more interactive. And I have to say too, from those major providers that sponsor some of these labs, like Apple, they are fascinated to find out too what you want to demo on their equipment and walk people through. So that's something where we have at least 30 either PCs or Chromebooks or Apple devices, and you can actually show someone how you're doing something in your district, or how they can actually implement that back there. And each one of those will be hardwired to make sure that you know, we have internet access no matter what. You're not relying on the Wi-Fi for that. The other requests we'd have, we'll reach out to you later, but if there's a special type of software that needs to be pre-installed, we have to know that far ahead of time as well. And then BYOD workshops. So this is something that we're looking at trying this year, but we might have another wireless access point or something, but you can have people just bring in their own devices, because sometimes that can make a big difference between trying something in a lab versus bringing your own device in. But consider when you're structuring that, how you might modify some of those demonstrations and such, given that you might be working with, you know, 12 or 15 different types of devices in a room. We can't guarantee any kind of schedule for these about, you know, when you can say like, I'm only going to be here this day or not, but really it's based on what works in the total schedule. And this is where the art of scheduling comes in, because what we try and do is make sure that we don't have, for example, all the technical issues during 1 hour and then a bunch of leadership sessions in another hour. We try to make sure every hour is balanced across all topics. So it's not something that we can necessarily move as easily as you might think. And then again, sales type presentations won't be accepted, because we do not get great feedback from these. And so I want to clarify some of that, because we've had some really fantastic presentations by our vendor partners that are not necessarily sales type presentations. So a sales type presentation, if you submit it, is basically like, I'm going to give everybody a half-hour overview of my product. That's not going to be accepted. If you present it in terms of, there's a problem that exists in school districts and county offices of education, and here are some different ways that people have approached solving it, and here's one way that you can approach it, and your product happens to support that solution, that is far more likely to be accepted and to be attended, frankly, at the conference, than just pitching it as a product demo. And that has to be legit, you know, that people will find out within the first few minutes if it really was a fancy description for a product demo, and then they're not going to want to stay for your session. That's where we really recommend too having somebody from a district co-present with you, because again, they can speak to their peers about what's working and not working. Again, we will have HDMI, but if you're planning to bring in, a lot of people want to bring in an Apple device and connect it. If it doesn't directly connect to HDMI, then you need to bring your own connectors. So we go down here to submit abstract, and it's going to require you to log into your account. And I think I have my fake one. I have to make sure it's the right one. Nope, it's the other one. Oh dear. So, okay, this is again, we live demo. The problem is when you're an administrator of the actual event account, So you can, if you don't have an account already, you can make a new account. So I'm going to create this using a, let's see, we'll do Cookie Monster at sesamestreet.com. That'd be really fascinating if I actually got an email back from them. Okay, so when you get in here, you're going to see the same screen, all right? But you're going to see this link up here for my submissions. You can continue from now. You can continue to work on your submissions all the way up into the submission deadline. So I'm going to submit abstract. Okay. And we ask this question is critical, whether you're submitting for someone else or you're going to be presenting yourself, because we get a lot of folks that do submit for someone else, and that's totally fine. You know, if you have an assistant that is going to be putting in all 4 of your presentations or something, but the way that the registration systems work when they automatically convert things, that's why it's critical for that. Again, we're going to ask for your organization type. We're really specific. If you're a corporate affiliate program, the reason why we need to know this is because as a year-round sponsor, you get a minimum number of sessions. So if you're an exhibitor and you're not sure if you're CAP or not, you can check at this website. So if not, then you want to put what type of vendor you are exhibiting or not. So you'll put in your organization, your title, your phone number. All of these are pretty basic to submitting most of these things. We'll ask you to upload an image right away. And that's critical for some of our, let's see if I can find a picture. That's critical, again, for our registration system, and we need to have that on file. So we will put in my picture. Then we'll ask for a brief bio and any accessibility accommodations. And then again, this is our code of conduct, duty of care, media release, and privacy policy. We just ask you to agree to that. If you need to add a co-presenter, you'll do that here and you'll enter the same information. It'll ask for a photo and everything like that. So save and continue. And again, you know, how to eat cookies. This is where you'll say what kind of session this is. And note here that we say panel microphones versus a single one as well. Hands-on lab, bring your own device workshop, whether you're asking for a single or a double. It's also critical here to say which strand. So data privacy and security, those are cybersecurity sessions, anything about student data privacy, anything about CalPads or data management. Strategy teams and leaderships, these are the ones that people tend to call soft skills, which is, you know, we disagree. We think those are more essential skills, but how to work with each other, basically, especially in a technology environment. Infrastructure and networks, somewhat self-explanatory, but anything with device management essentially too will go under there. And then if disaster planning and recovery, this has been a hot topic with the fires, with COVID, anything like that. Now, if you're not sure of this, just pick one, because our conference committee will go ahead and decide whether that's the right one or not if they accept the session. This is the new piece. And again, we're asking, what knowledge will attendees gain at this session? What will they walk away with? So they will learn the best way to eat cookies in our demo one. We're not, again, asking for a ton of detail, but just need to know what kind of presentation this basically is. Session description. So this is what you want to put, whatever you want to be shown in the actual agenda. I'm just going to put TBD for now. Please don't put TBD when you're in there. It's just for the sake of this training and recording. But whatever you want to actually show up, because it's very likely it won't change. And if you have additional materials now, that's fantastic, because that saves us from trying to manually upload things later, or explanatory pieces are also helpful. So you're going to save and continue again. You're going to review and make sure everything looks fine, and then hit submit. Okay, so you have a submission confirmation. You'll get an email confirming that. And also it will live up here under my submissions. So you'll see, here's my submission. I can take it out. I can edit it. If I'm submitting 5 or 6 and it's hard to find, I can search here. And if I say I want to submit another one, I'm just going to click home again. You see that same home screen, submit abstract, and start the process all over again. So I'm going to stop for a sec and check the chat and see, do we have questions coming in? I think we got some of those. Yeah, I think we got some of those answered. So yeah, so you can definitely go back and edit. We're not going to look at anything until that April 10th deadline. And after that, it'll still take us a couple days to go through everything. Okay. So just to recap, in this, we talked a bit about structuring your whole ideas and how to build that ahead of time. We talked about some presentation tips, and then how to actually walk through the system. So can I take any questions right now? Anything burning off of people's heads?
Hi, Laurel. Thanks for doing this.
Sure.
Quick question: if we've presented a session before and want to submit that same session again, would you encourage or discourage that?
Definitely encourage it. Yeah, it would help if you could let us know if it's been presented there. Otherwise, it's up to me remembering, or to remembering what we did previous times. But some of those were incredibly popular, and we have statistics from last time about what sessions people want to see again. So I definitely encourage it. And if it looks like something where we say, hey, this is when the conference committee goes through and they say, this is a great session, but can you update it for X, Y, and Z? Then we'll reach out and we'll let you know that. One example is that somebody submitted a session last year about leadership. And we said, this is a fantastic session, but the topic was really useful also for teams, not just at the leadership level. So we asked them to repeat the session. One is a teams one and one is a leadership one. Deadline is April 10th. And how long to reserve for? I wouldn't go less than 3 to 5 minutes. I know I'm giving a range, but if you plan for a whole 10 minutes, that might be a bit too much. Depends on how technical your presentation is. The more technical it is, I'd say the more time you want to reserve for that. And I noticed too, a lot of our audience may not feel comfortable speaking up in a room. I know we do a lot of these webinars and I'll ask for questions, and people feel unsure about talking in front of a large group. So that's the other reason why we provide that kind of cushion time for transitioning from session to session, because there's people who may not feel comfortable and they want to just come up to you as a presenter and ask one-on-one what their question is. So for the session description, whatever, it can come across as a paragraph, it can come as bullet points, but we do ask that you use complete sentences, because again, this will be automatically converted in the registration system. Basically what we do is we press accept on the session and it automatically builds into the agenda from there. If we get a submission that just says more to come, well, not only is it not likely to be accepted, but then that means we have to go back and ask you to edit and add more detail and so on. Trying to think of burning questions or thoughts that we've had in the past. Can you think of anything, Tuda?
No, but I do want to reiterate, like, hands-on labs and workshops.
Yes.
I was at Q and I didn't want to jump in while you were talking, Laurel, but someone actually brought up a SharePoint presentation that Bree and I had done like in 2017, and it stuck with them that much because it was that applicable. So I know a lot of the time, and no offense to any vendors in the room. But, I know a lot of the time, a lot of the vendors do the technical stuff, but I think it means a lot coming from their peers and seeing hands-on, like how they're applying it in their district. Like I tried to get Ryan, I think his last name is Ginto. He does a lot with Microsoft Azure and like a lot of the security tools and that. So I'm trying to get him to do one. So if anyone else has any like technical kind of hands-on things that they can show people right away that they can implement right away, I think those are really helpful and really successful sessions and look great coming from our members too.
Yeah. +1 on that. I did get a question come in on the chat about where to see previous agendas. So you can go back to events and on our website, past conferences. You can go to, let's see, probably, I'm going to pick 2019 since that was the last one that we had prior to COVID happening. You can click on agenda here. And I believe you can still see it if you click full agenda. All right, so you can see all of the different sessions that we've had. So you can click more info, see who did the session, and see examples of some of those items. And Tuda's pointing out she'll add 2021 back there so you can see last year's sessions.
I'm doing it as we speak. So you might need to refresh or clear your cache, but it'll be there in about 5 minutes.
Thanks. Yes, and that's another important point, Michael. I want to reiterate that verbally, but no one's expected to be an absolute expert in any of these things. And honestly, we've had, I'd say, a good chunk of sessions last year were about what did we learn from COVID? What did we learn from the pandemic? What mistakes did we make? And honestly, I think that when you are not trying to be the expert and you're trying to talk about problem solving and how to get through something, it actually can encourage a lot of audience participation, because probably if you've had that problem, I guarantee you half that audience has probably had some version of that problem before too. Great. All right, so again, feel free to email me, laurel.nava@cite.org or speakers@cite.org with any questions before the submission deadline, even after. If you want to walk through what you're planning to present or submit, we're here and we're happy to help. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Tuda for jumping in and being my co-presenter. Thank you Jason as well for introducing yourself and joining our team. All right, have a good day and I look forward to April 10th.